Okay. Hello, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute here. Give folks another minute to trickle in.
I need something to write
Keep an eye on the waiting room.
on. In my backpack, there is that Bush Foundation thing because I didn't.
Right. Go ahead and get started here. Probably have a few more folks trickling in, but got a lot to get through, so we can dive right in. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our part 2 of our Pollinator Ambassador training. So this is kind of the second part of training where we dive a little bit more into the volunteering 101. So this is where we'll talk about, how to set up a table at a tabling event, questions you might be asked, how to be a good public speaker. So that's kind of the bulk of the content that we'll get into tonight. Just to kind of set the scene, Elaine and I are sitting right next to each other in the same room on our own computers. We had some weird tech issues with getting things started last week, so we hope we figure that out. But if volume or sound or anything gets weird at any point, please unmute yourself and let us know, and we will fix that. So I know I recognize some names from last week. We are excited to have you joining us again, but we will just start by introducing ourselves again for anybody who wasn't able to attend last week. My name is Elise Bernstein. I am a researcher and outreach coordinator with the Bee Squad here at the University of Minnesota Bee Lab. The Bee Squad is the outreach and education team that's part of the lab, so we do a lot of work with the public, talking to folks about how they can help pollinators. And then I also work on bumblebee research in the lab with the Bumblebee Atlas and the NestQuest projects.
And I am Elaine Evans. I am an extension educator and researcher here at the Bee Lab. So I focus on pollinator conservation with all of my work. So I have research projects, and some of them are involving public participation. So work with Elise on Atlas and NestQuest, as well as just generally trying to promote awareness of pollinators. And so Pollinator Ambassadors here is a big help for that mission to help get that information about helping pollinators out to people.
And we want to get to know all of you as well. So we'll start with a quick little icebreaker. So in the chat, please share with us where you're zooming in from and who your favorite pollinator is.
It's not working. People were thinking.
Cool. So it looks like we got people from lots of different places. Kirkston, South Minneapolis, St. Paul, Woodbury. Squash bees, that's a good favorite. Cool. I think my favorite pollinator right now is probably, I should have thought about this before I made this the question, but this past summer I saw the yellow banded bumblebee in real life for the first time, and that was really exciting. They're very cute and round. So that I'll say that'll be my favorite pollinator for today.
Yeah, I guess I should have thought too. um, I'm really fascinated with these oil collecting bees. Macropus is the genus. They're not very common. I've gotten to see them just a handful of times. I've seen them twice in two different places in over 30 years of looking for bees. So that they only visit certain flowers. So yellow loose stripe flowers, usually kind of associated with wetter areas. And anyway, they're really fascinating because they collect these oils that they feed their babies, not just pollen and nectar.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves and sharing your favorite pollinators. So I think we can dive in here. So last week we hosted part 1 of our Pollinator Ambassador training. So we gave kind of a broad overview into some of the pollinator biology, ecology, and conservation concepts. And we started to talk about the pollinator toolkit and the different activities in the toolkit that are related to pollinator importance and diversity. We recorded last week's training. I'm hoping to get that posted on the website by the end of the week. Our recording from the version of this training that we did last year is still available on that website if you missed our training last week. And then tonight we are diving into expectations while volunteering. So we're gonna specifically focus on tabling and giving presentations. So we'll talk through how to set up a table at an event, answering how to and frequently asked questions. And then we will also introduce you to a few other things as well. So a few just volunteer expectation reminders. Once you have completed all your Pollinator Ambassador training, we expect that you are committed to attending or hosting 5 events or presentations each year. So these could be either tabling events, so attending an event like the Minneapolis Monarch Festival or a home and garden show or an Earth Day event, for example, giving a talk to a very specific audience, or running some other type of pollinator activity. These events are either things that you are attending as a guest, so having a table set up at an event somebody else is putting on, or you can organize and host your own events. So that could be you have a table set up by yourself, you invite others to collaborate with you, or you're giving some type of presentation. One of the most common questions we get from our pollinator ambassadors is, how do I find events? So part of the reason why we ask for your location information in your application is so we can funnel presentation or tabling opportunities to you when they come up in your area. So the Bee Squad gets so many requests for events and presentations, but we are a fairly small team of people and we're not able to travel to the entire state. So I am directly reaching out to folks when opportunities arise in their areas. One of the new features of our Canvas site is these discussion boards. So I've created one that is called the event board. So event opportunities I will post there as well. This is also a great place for you to post event ideas or opportunities, especially if you'd like help or collaboration from other pollinator ambassadors. Can you host your own event? I think I already gave away the answer to this question, but yes, if you would like to coordinate and host your own event, that is totally acceptable. And we'll talk a little bit about how you go about doing that. So there's a lot of different locations and venues and places that might be appropriate for events as a pollinator ambassador. So these are places like libraries hosted by or with local garden clubs or in local city or county parks. These are often some really great venues and audiences that are looking for presentations about pollinators. So what are our rules and guidelines for hosting an event? So picking an appropriate place or venue for your event is pretty important. You know, you want to find a place that's accessible, will attract people that might be interested in helping pollinators. So like I said, a local city or county park. You know, getting in contact with the park board or folks that are managing the park to make sure you have all of the appropriate permissions and permits and things that you might need to be using that space. Community centers can be appropriate as well. Sometimes these are very central in some communities and host lots of other events that attract lots of folks from lots of different backgrounds and professions, or you know, different staples within that community. Libraries are great as well. I know one of our current pollinator ambassadors has done a lot of work with her local library to get events set up. Garden clubs as well. I've done talks to garden clubs. I know lots of other folks in the Bee Lab have done talks with garden clubs as well. They're pretty much always looking for presentations about pollinators. The most important thing with finding your event space, you know, whether that's a park, community center, or a library, is just making sure that you have all of the appropriate permissions to be using that space. Another important rule that we have for our pollinator ambassadors, it relates to working with youth or minors under the age of 18. So per university policy, anybody that is interacting with minors needs to go through a background checking process, which is why we ask that when you're planning an event, you plan it not necessarily targeting kids as your primary audience. So if this is an event where families are showing up, so parents are coming and their kids just happen to be with them, or you're tabling to the general public and anybody can show up, that's totally appropriate. But we ask that you don't host an event that is specifically advertised to children. In terms of advertising your events, there are a few different ways to go about this. So creating physical flyers, posting them around your neighborhood or coffee shops or community centers and places that the public in your community might see them is a great way to get folks to attend your event. Posting on social media can be great as well if there are Facebook groups or Nextdoor groups or other platforms online that people in your community are involved with. Social media is a great way to spread the word. Trying to get your event in local papers as well can help with advertising, community radio stations, and we can help with this. So if you want us to share your event on our social media platforms, we can talk about that with you. We can also post your event to our Bee Lab calendar as well. Oh, it doesn't like this slide. What is on this slide is our templates of a flyer. So we have flyer templates and social media templates and things that are available for you. They are on our website. I don't know why this isn't working, but oh yeah, weird. Anyway, so we have templates for events. So it has the Bee Lab logo, our little pollinator ambassadors hearts, and we can get the event details on the calendar for you. So first, we're going to talk about tabling events and some kind of guidelines and things to keep in mind while you're tabling. So there are a few expectations when you're tabling, but we have 3 key expectations. We expect that you are show up prepared to act professional. You know, you are representing the university while you're volunteering as a pollinator ambassador. We expect you to be respectful, so this is respectful to the space that you're using, as well as the people around you, both the public audience that you're interacting with, as well as the other vendors or people tabling at an event you're attending. And we want you to have fun. Working with pollinators is really fun and very engaging, and when you're having fun, it makes it easier to engage with others on the topics that you're tabling or presenting about. Another big expectation for tabling is to follow the rules that are set by the event. And this can differ, based on the size of event, the type of event that you're attending. So make sure that you're paying close attention to the emails and guidelines and things that event hosts are sending out, but just some general things that are good to keep in mind. So the first being arrive early. So expect generally most events have setup times. They'll usually reserve 1 to 2 hours before the event begins for setup, but follow the arrival time that are set by organizers. Sometimes they give you a time window of 2 hours where you can show up anytime within there as long as you're ready to go by the event. Sometimes they want you there an hour early, so just make sure you're keeping track of what's set out by the event organizers. But it's important to consider, how much time you're actually going to need. How much time is it going to take you to get to your event? How much time is it going to take you to unload and park your vehicle? And then how much time is it going to take to set up your table display? It's important to take all of these things into consideration when you're preparing for tabling. Then again, follow all rules set by event organizers. Some of them will require proper signage. We have a few banners that we have here in the B Lab. If you're in the Twin Cities, we might be able to let you borrow these. Otherwise, we have, those different flyers and things that I showed. We can help come up with some signage if you need some signage for your booth. Another just general rule that's pretty consistent across the board is stay at your table at all times. Of course, if you need to use the restroom or something like that, make sure you're talking to the folks at the table next to you or that are organizing the event to see if someone can watch your table while you have to step away for a minute. But generally, staying at your table at all times is important. Along with staying at the event for the whole time. So for the duration of the event, we expect that you are able to stay. So this not leaving early, being present at your booth the whole time. Cleaning up after yourself once the event is over, again, is super important. So packing up your supplies, throwing away any trash that might be lingering around your table, and then helping those around you. Tabling events can feel a little bit chaotic sometimes during the setup and the takedown. So just being there to help support the others around you can make things go a little bit more smoothly. Another important reminder is just to limit your cell phone use while you are tabling. So when you're sitting there, there might be times when nobody is approaching your table. But if you're sitting there in your chair, kind of leaned away from the table, scrolling on your phone, that doesn't make you appear super approachable. So, even when there's nobody at your table, try not to sit there scrolling on your phone. We want you to actively participate. So we have so many different activities from the toolkit. So the pollinator plates, our posters that have nesting habitat and nesting information, pollinator diversity cards, our pollinator trivia, how bees see flowers. There are lots of different activities that are part of the toolkit that are great ways to engage with folks as they're stopping by your table. So sometimes thinking of a little sound bite that relates to one of the activities as people are passing by, asking them, do you want to try your hand at pollinator trivia? Or did you know that bees come in all shapes and sizes and colors, and different sort of little fun facts that you can add to get people's attention as they're passing by to potentially engage them in one of the activities. In terms of what to wear to tabling events, most of the tabling events are pretty casual, so like I said, you want to look professional, but you don't need to come dressed in your business professional attire. Generally, if you have any University of Minnesota gear, t-shirts or sweatshirts or anything like that, that's always great to wear. We have aspirations to create buttons for you that have this cute little bee logo on them. Hopefully we will get that done before field season and send those out to our pollinator ambassadors. But just generally, remembering that you want to look presentable, but you don't need to worry about being dressed in your business professional attire. Another important thing to keep in mind while you're tabling is we want you to record attendance. So keeping track of the number of people that you're talking to. So this goes for presentations as well, which, you know, sometimes when you're giving presentations, it's easier to have like a sign-in sheet or something to keep track of people that way. But when you're tabling, you know, just keeping track of folks, either using some sort of physical clicker or an app on your phone. I use an app when I'm tabling. The one that I have has, you can have lots of different events in it, and you can add a title and things, so you can keep track of how many people you're talking to throughout your event. We report this information as part of our general B-Lab federal reporting that we do every January. And this helps us kind of evaluate the impacts of this Pollinator Ambassadors program and understand how many different people we're reaching across the state. So recording attendance while you're tabling or giving a presentation is really important. So how do you set up for a tabling event? There are a lot of different ways to go about this, and you kind of get to pick and choose what's appropriate for the event that you're going to and the materials that you have. So everybody that completes all portions of the training, so this is all of the quizzes, the cumulative exam, as well as the practice presentation, we are sending those folks toolkits. So once you've finished all required portions of the training. So everybody will have access to a pollinator toolkit. We have lots of different B-Lab handouts that are available on the Pollinator Ambassadors website. And you are also welcome to create your own activities and handouts and things to have at tabling events. We just ask that you run those by us first. So that's why I say this is kind of a pick and choose, you know, your own adventure based on what you might have. So this is one example of what a table might look like. So I have one of our B-Lab banners on the table here. That's okay if you don't have one of those. But generally, you know, having some type of tablecloth on the table is a great idea. We have one that's just kind of a U of M-ish maroon. So any sort of plain tablecloth is great. We've got the different activities from the Pollinator Toolkit. So I have in the middle of this table here the pollinator diversity matching game, you know, set up and ready to go for someone that's passing by. You know, you can explain, this is a matching game. Do you want to learn about the different types of pollinators we have in the Midwest? And it's ready to go for them. Then I have the pollinator plate and the How BC Flowers activities kind of also closer to the edge of the table, so folks can reach them a little bit more readily. We have a couple of insect specimen boxes. I think we still have some specimen boxes that we can share with people. Those are kind of first come, first serve. We can provide those to you for events, as well as lots of handouts. It's really great for people attending tabling events to be able to have something to take with them when they go home. So maybe they have questions for you about what kind of plants they should plant, and when you're able to give them a handout, you know, that helps them remember maybe what you talked about with them, or gives them new ideas when they go back to look at that. So this is just a top view of the table, you know, kind of where we have things set out. We've got handouts across the top, you know, so we can hand those to folks, people can reach them as well, specimen boxes on either side, and then those more hands-on activities towards the front of the table. So we have a few different handouts that you can use while you're tabling. The first is our Plants for Minnesota Bees handout. This one's got just a little bit of information and some really beautiful photos on the front. And then on the back side, it's got a list of a bunch of different plant species. It has both native and non-native species, and it says which ones are native or non-native. There's also information on how much shade those plants prefer. Anything else on that handout that I'm forgetting?
I was
Plants for
answering a
Minnesota
question,
bees.
so.
On the Plants for Minnesota Bees handout, there's if it's native or non-native, how much shade.
If it's a shrub or
Yes, and if it's a shrub or
a forb
or a tree. So there's a pretty diverse list on there. So that's a really, really great handout for folks. Another one is our how to create habitat for stem nesting bees. So this one, again, has a little bit of information about these solitary cavity nesting bees on one side, as well as kind of what the process looks like throughout the year to cut back your perennial plants to create stem nesting or habitat for stem nesting bees. And then on the other side of that handout, there is a plant list of plants that have those, when you cut the tops back, that have those hollow stems for these cavity nesting bees. Next is our Plant a Pollinator Tea Garden handout. So this is a list of plants that are pollinator favorites that are edible. So it's lots of plants like bee balm, for example, that we can steep into teas. So plants that are great for bees, but also might have some benefits to us as well. And then there's our More Than Bumblebees handout. So this is the pie chart shows a breakdown of some of the different species that we have in Minnesota. And there's some additional information about where they nest and that kind of thing. Activities. So like I mentioned, the pollinator diversity matching game is really great. This one is great because you can make it really accessible to a lot of different audiences. So the cards are the same. They're just, some of them are green, some of them are yellow. They both have the picture on one side and the name on the other. So if you want to make it a little bit easier, you can have all of the cards picture side up and have people just match the pictures. And then if you want to make things a little bit harder, you can have one side pictures, one side words. So it's great, and it's fairly easy to kind of flip between the two different options there. So folks can engage with that game or activity in different ways. The pollinator plate is great as well. I find this is sometimes the easiest way to get people's attention, particularly when you have the ice cream or the pizza card sitting out, because everybody loves pizza and ice cream, and that's a quick, kind of a quick way to draw people in to talk to them about how pollinators are affecting our food systems. How Bees See Flowers is another fun activity, which again is another one that folks can kind of easily, quickly look through on their own. This one, the cards on one side have the flowers the way we see them, and then on the other side have how bees see them. Bees see in an ultraviolet light spectrum, so the flowers look quite a bit different. And that's another great way to engage people and kind of have a conversation about pollinators. Not pictured is the pollinator trivia here. The pollinator trivia is available as you can either print out the questions, or now we have the card set, which will be included in the toolkits. But this is something that I usually kind of have off the table. And when folks are stopping by, you can ask, do you want to answer a pollinator trivia question? And then you can pull out the cards and find a question to ask them. In this particular example, I have some of our more specific bumblebee content organized together. So we have a box that has just specimens of bumblebees. We have this little tiny chunk of a bumblebee nest to give folks an idea of what bumblebee nest looks like. And then a couple of other handouts. So there's these postcards for Bumblebee Watch. Bumblebee Watch is a participatory science platform or biodiversity portal where folks can upload photos of bumblebees on flowers. And then there's our Midwest Bumblebee ID Guide as well, which is a super popular handout at lots of different types of events. It's got female bumblebees on one side and male bumblebees on the other. And that is the basics of setting up a table. So, that's just kind of one example of how I often choose to set up a table at an event. But like I said, you can pick and choose different handouts and activities and things that are appropriate for the event that you are doing. I'm going to stop sharing here and pass things over to Elaine.
I will start sharing. So I am going to talk us through some of these next sections. So in addition to tabling, there are options to have one of your, or however many of your events be talks or presentations. And so for presentations, those can definitely count towards your 5 events. We do have slide decks that are available that are part of the virtual pollinator toolkit. So in addition to that physical kit, we have a shared folder that has Google Slide and PowerPoint and PDF versions of presentations. You are allowed to modify these slide decks. There are a lot of times when I do presentations, I'm picking parts from different ones and putting them together. So we do have one that covers the pollinator plate. So I might just want to bring in a couple of those to engage people with. The 4 actions for pollinators is one that I tend to bring into almost every single talk that I do, because that is so important. But you're welcome to besides just using the pieces of those kit, if you want to modify them, if you have your own content, that's great. We just ask that you do share those modifications with us before you present, so that we can keep an eye on content. And we do ask that you give us about 2 weeks to review your slides, just so that if it's particularly in the summertime, we tend to be busy with field work and it can be difficult for us to schedule in time, but we want to make sure we can just take a look at things and make sure they're in line with our current most up-to-date scientific understanding. And that also, just looking at effective communication, all those kind of things, just to try to make sure that those presentations are as effective and as accurate as we can have them. And just as a note, the final requirement for an assignment before you can become a pollinator ambassador is to give a practice talk to the program leaders. And we'll explain a little bit more about that as we go along. So we do have some recommendations for just when you are giving talks and presentations, for being a good public speaker. And for that, we talk about the following, the 3 C's. So the first is connection, making sure that you have a connection with your audience. When you're doing a public presentation, it can really help to tell some of your story of who you are, why you personally feel a connection to the topic, and what it means to you. That can help people to understand who you are, where you're coming from, what your connection is, and then they a lot of times there's more natural sympathy that can come in when you're showing your connection. You also want to connect to the audience, so there's different ways to do that in terms of providing engaging material. For the content, making sure that your content has some active learning elements to it, making sure that your content is organized in a way that will make sense to people. And then construction involves that formation of going between topics, including enough time for people to reflect and learn and engage, and making sure that as a whole, it's constructed in a way that's going to be digestible for the audience. For this presentation evaluation, it can be a 5-minute talk on any topic of your choice. So we do have there is the option to use materials from the digital toolkit for the that we have for pollinator ambassadors, but it can be any topic. If there's something that else that you're used to presenting on, or anything that you're interested in, it can be any any topic, doesn't need to be anywhere related to pollinators. We just want to see how you do as a presenter. So yeah, people could pick hobbies, historical things, anything. The most important thing is that you're excited and that you feel confident in presenting the information. So we really want you to showcase your public speaking skills. So make sure that you're telling a story and make sure that you, one of the things we look for is that personal connection you have to that story. We do have a rubric that is available that we use when we're evaluating these. So that is on the Pollinator Ambassador's website, and we do suggest you take a look at that so that you'll know what we're using to evaluate your presentation. That might also help you just with looking at reminders for ways to create that content in a way that's going to be engaging. So we're looking at organization, having presenting information in an easy to understand way, and just your general presentation skills. So you know, varying your tone of voice and things like that. We also have content prepared for you in the Canvas site on and in the handbook in particular on frequently asked questions. So the handbook has a full list of questions that you might be asked while tabling or after presentation. So that's something that depending on where you're at, you might want to print out that section of the handbook and have it with you so you can reference it. But right now we're just going to go over some of these general categories and approaches to dealing with these questions. You know, so at tabling, there's always a lot of questions, but with presentations as well. So a question we get a lot is what plants are good for bees? What kinds of flowers do bees like? Should I plant only native bee plants? How can I support bees? So for all these planting questions, there's a lot of different approaches there. You know, we in the handbook, we outline a lot of information that you can go to help answer those kind of questions. Those are good things to kind of think about and be prepared for. For how can I support bees? This is where we drill in that 4 actions that we talked about last time a bit. I really like having just that number so you can remember to say all of these actions. So you know, people a lot of times are already asking about planting, but reminding people about planting flowers, keeping those flowers free of pesticides, creating homes, taking climate action, and collecting data. We also tend to get a lot of questions about honeybees. So people that you know, can't become a beekeeper, but they want to save the bees. How can they help? People are looking for resources for beekeeping. Here at the Bee Lab, we do have a lot of resources for beekeepers. People also ask questions about honey, how bees make honey, how long does honey stay good, what to do if it crystallizes. Some people want to be able to support the Bee Lab. They want to know where they can buy Bee Lab honey. We also get a lot of questions about wasps, and sometimes even if it's not wasps, even if people don't know that they're asking a question about wasps, they're asking a question about wasps. So, you know, people a lot of times will just come up and say, I hate wasps, which is not a question, but it is still a statement that you may have to deal with. And it's good to have a response to that. There are some really nice resources about the diversity of wasps and all the different kinds of roles that they play. So here's one where they may not know they're talking about wasps. They may be talking about ground bees, you know, bees that are coming out and stinging, which a lot of times are yellow jacket wasps that do nest in the ground. You know, yeah, people have all kinds of feelings about wasps. Why are wasps evil? What's the difference between bees and wasps? can the bee lab remove a wasp nest from my house? That's a question that we get a lot. Answer is no. So these are all questions that are common that we do have answers to in our frequently asked questions. So if you're curious about any of these, you can spend some time with that content. But then there are always questions that you'll get that may be more difficult to answer, things that are either really open-ended or maybe things that we don't have answers to in the handbook. And so it's important to also think about when you don't, what to do when you don't know the answer to a question. So we're there as the experts. We want to appear knowledgeable, and you are knowledgeable, but it doesn't help to try to answer questions, just make up answers to questions when you don't know the answer. So it's really important when you don't know the answer to a question that you will let people know, like, oh, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm going to have to look into the answer to that. And if it's a situation where you can get back to them, you can let them know that you'll get back to them. But it's the best approach here is to admit when you don't know.
People ask us questions all the time that we don't know the answer to. So it will happen and it's okay.
Yes. There are also, it can be difficult to answer questions about pesticides. Sometimes people are wanting to negotiate with a neighbor that's applying pesticides, and they already don't want pesticides. We do have some newly developed materials that we have in the Canvas site that just give you a lot of information about pesticides, and that does have some approaches in there for advice to help people know what to do for giving information about pesticides, for talking to your neighbors about pesticides use, things like that. People will also come up with bee or pollinator identification questions. So they'll have their phone there and they'll say, can you tell what is this? And maybe it's something that maybe it's not. One nice thing, if it's that I recommend to people when it's something that I don't recognize, is to let them know about, if you can tell it's a bumblebee, you can recommend Bumblebee Watch. Otherwise, iNaturalist is a great resource where you can let people know that is a place where they can share their bee or other pollinator photos, and they can get help with identification there. So as I've already said, that full list of difficult questions you may receive is available in the Pollinator Ambassador Handbook. Any questions from you all about difficult questions? Anybody who's any of our pollinator ambassadors who've already started doing stuff, if you have any experience to share with how you've handled these. All right, so
I think
yes.
this just goes through the
Oh,
same points.
okay.
With more details.
More details. So yeah, if for specifically responding when you don't know, you can, when you don't know the answer, you can also refer them to the Bee Lab website. So we do have a lot of information there. That's a good place when you don't know the answer to suggest people go there. If it is more of a complicated question, you can give them the email address at the Bee Squad. We get a lot of questions there all the time, and so we have a whole system set up for dealing with them. So we do get questions for recommendations for various businesses like plant stores and pest control services. And we can't make recommendations for shopping at certain businesses. You can make recommendations on what to look for when they are shopping. So, if they're looking for native plants in particular, you can tell them how to look at the plants that are being offered and determine whether they're native or not. For those plants and seeds, it is important to look for plants that have not been treated with pesticides, so we can give people information generally about how to look at those plants and determine those things. So I already talked about this a little bit, but with the neighbors using pesticides, you can give that general information on pesticides and pollinators, but we do want to avoid being really specific, so, giving people information where they're going to say, the University of Minnesota told me to stop doing this and stop doing that. That's not what we're doing. We're just giving people information. Another one thing that people can do that when they are dealing with this situation is to have a yard sign with information on pesticide-free gardens and ways to protect pollinators. And this can be a way to educate people who are around you, and they may not have thought about pollinators being present in those in people's yards and gardens. And yeah, there's a big diversity of pollinators that will show up in people's pollinator gardens. So we already talked about this with iNaturalist. So yeah, iNaturalist is an amazing resource, great to share with people who are getting excited. It's really fun when I do love this, when people come up with their photos, and it's a good chance to get to see the cool things that people see. You can see the excitement that they have. So it's this really great opportunity to encourage that excitement and encourage them to get more involved. Another aspect of this is, letting them know if they do share their photos with either Bumblebee Watch or iNaturalist, that becomes part of a really important scientific record, that scientists are using those records to look at what's happening with pollinators. So beyond just it being a tool for them to figure out what they're seeing, it's a way to broaden the impact of what their observations are. I also wanted to talk about promoting inclusion in your volunteer work. So there are, at the University of Minnesota, we have certain civil rights laws that we are obligated to comply with. And I want to explain what those are, why they're important, and how these apply to your role as a volunteer. So there are federal civil rights laws that at the University of Minnesota, we are prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, religious creed, disability, age, political beliefs. And also it's prohibited to discriminate with reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activities. So those are all the federal civil rights laws, the laws that we're at the University of Minnesota comply with. And as a representative of the University of Minnesota in this program, you also are obligated to comply with these civil rights. So beyond civil rights, it's important to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So beyond just discrimination, we want to ensure that all members of our community have equitable access to the university and the resources that we have. So it's our responsibility to serve and support these different groups. So American Indian and other indigenous populations, people of color, including underrepresented groups and new immigrant populations, people with both apparent and non-apparent disabilities, people who identify as women, and people of various gender and sexual identities and expression. So there is some thought that it can take to make sure that we are being inclusive and providing this equitable access. So these things, both civil rights and diversity, equity, inclusion, are important because discrimination is a thing that does create this unequal society where there are individuals that don't get the same benefits. So that discrimination can continue to harm groups even after the discriminatory practices have ended. So there are long-lasting effects that are compounded when they aren't addressed proactively. So that's why we want to take steps to address these with the programs that we are presenting for the public. So looking at expectations that we have of you as volunteers in the program. So looking at just compliance when we're looking at non-discriminating based on sex. We want to make sure that all participants feel welcome, that we don't have sex-separate programs or activities, contests, or awards, and of course, no sexual harassment. When we look beyond compliance to inclusion, we can look at promoting equal participation across sexes. So one of the things we can do is highlighting achievements of people who identify as women. So there are lots of amazing pollinator biologists who are women that we can highlight their work. We can also look at what this means for non-discrimination based on race or national origin. So again, making sure that all participants feel welcome. With this, it can be really important to be aware of implicit bias. So there is a resource that I really like that is a test for implicit bias that was put together by at Harvard, some researchers there. And I recommend that you go through and take this test, and it helps to just go through and learn about implicit bias, learn what implicit bias you may have that you can then counteract. Inclusion beyond just compliance with that non-discrimination involves serving the needs of underserved communities. So, so that may be not just including, presenting to those communities, but asking those communities how they would like to engage with pollinators and creating programs to serve their needs. So this could be something that would be, for example, maybe food access is something that's really important with that underserved community. Looking at pollinator gardens to support community gardens could be something, an example of something that would fit there. For accessibility, we want to reduce barriers for people with physical or mental limitations. So that can have strategies for people who may not be able to read material or may have visual or hearing impairments, varying abilities. So we have tried to design our materials to try to be accessible to, but there are lots of different creative things we can do to try to make these materials more accessible. And so when you are creating content, really being aware of creating that content to be as accessible as possible. So one example would be connecting with organizations that serve participants with mental challenges or physical challenges, and working to design an activity that can directly engage those participants. There is also public notification. So we want to ensure that all groups within a community are aware that extension materials are available to everyone. And in terms of inclusion, making those connections to underserved communities, just take note of who might be missing in your audiences that could be there. And trying to reach out directly, trying to make sure that we can include and have these materials that be accessible to as many people as we can. So I also wanted to talk about these, I'm sorry, I'm gonna pause a second and see if there's any questions there or ideas, experiences to share.
Feel free to either pop stuff in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself and share, go right ahead.
I just want to say thank you for including this because it's extremely important. I've been working with people recently who are differently abled in terms of sensory abilities and trying to communicate science, hands-on labs with them. And it's really important to really think about how we can reach all people. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, and yeah, I'd love to hear more about your experiences, how you've what solutions you've come up with that too. So moving on, but feel free to, or if anything comes in the chat, let me know. We do have these, what we're calling right now, bonus modules. So the essential training does not involve these modules, but these are topics that we do get questions about and that are providing some more detail. We do talk about some of these things in the general content, but we wanted to do a deeper dive into these topics. And so we've created these additional modules that they're not part of the basic training, but they're something that you can go to get a refresher, or if you're interested in these topics, we encourage you to explore them. And they do cover important issues for pollinators. So pesticides is definitely something that a lot of people have questions about, how pesticides are impacting pollinators. It can be a little bit overwhelming because there's a lot of detail in the topic, but we've compiled resources to introduce you to some different classes of pesticides and understand how they're impacting pollinators. So, I mean, our basic, most simple message that we include in our basic training is just, if you have habitat for pollinators, keep it free of pesticides, including insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides. And there are levels of complication beyond that. So one caveat here is that there's a lot of new research on this. There are a lot of new pesticides that come out. And so, you know, new classes of pesticides come out on a fairly regular basis. Seems like about every 10 years or so, there's kind of a new major change in pesticides. And then research needs to be done and it takes a while. Pollinators are really diverse. So understanding how pesticides affect this broad group of organisms, there's always new research coming out. But we are, yeah, I'm really proud of what we put together, and we've tried to get to kind of the essential pieces there to help you understand what the current state of knowledge is for pesticides impacting pollinators. We also have a section about climate. So, in the module that we've put together, we'll go into more depth about how climate change can alter species distributions, reduce biodiversity, get into phenological mismatches, affecting pollination. So this, again, is another area where there's a lot of new research. Climate change research tends to need to be done over a longer period of time, or people are doing experiments where they'll have setups where they can mimic future climate and see how it impacts insects. Yeah, again, kind of an evolving thing as new research is coming in, but we have it up to date with where we're at now for our understanding of climate and pollinators. We also wanted to get something in there on policy. So our research at the Bee Lab can influence and inform land management decisions and also policy decisions. So there are all kinds of different levels of policy that can impact pollinators. Some from federal, state, city, county organizations, even neighborhood levels. So there's big federal things like the Farm Bill or the Endangered Species Act, but there's city regulations on plant height, or all these different scales that can have significant impacts on pollinators. So we wanted to give information, just background information about some of these policies are, as well as talking about ways to engage with policy and how we can advise people to help them engage and be involved in policy to support pollinators. So yeah, again, unmute and interrupt and ask questions whenever you want to. That is the content that we wanted to cover with you for today. So we are always available for questions. If you want to email either of us with questions about any of this, we are happy to answer questions. Happy to take more questions now.
Hi, Nicole here. I got a couple questions. One is, can we elaborate about the rusty bumblebee and that it's what is it, federally endangered now, I think you mentioned, or it's on the list? I mean, that can be part of the message that we have on our tables, and that's okay to do that, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the rusty patch bumblebee has been listed as an endangered species since 2017. And it is a species that is still around. And Minnesota is one of the strongholds. So it's a nice way to have it's an endangered species that people can engage with sometimes in their own backyards.
Yeah, like almost increase that awareness that needs to happen. So in your information that you'll have, do you have anything in there about the rusty patch bumblebee and its status at all, or?
Do we have much on rusty patch?
No.
Okay.
There's I think some links in the policy module on Canvas about just like the Endangered Species Act in general, and I think there might be some other Rusty Patch specific things, but there's not, we don't
Okay.
have like extensive Rusty Patch Bumblebee content.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have rusty patch bumblebee information on the Bee Lab website.
Okay. Okay, good.
And
That'll work. Yeah.
the Fish and Wildlife Service has put together great resources on rusty patch bumblebee too.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I see that somebody wanted to see the requirements for the presentation again.
I can find that too.
And then while Elise is looking for that, I just wanted to jump. This is Liz Shepherd. I wanted to jump off of Nicole's questions. My nature center has been talking about doing a bio blitz for pollinators this summer, and that's obviously a great time for us to have our pollinator toolkit out. But I am confused since we are within the range of a federally endangered species. Can we do a bio blitz? We don't know if there are rusty patch bumblebees here yet. Uh,
They're it is, so depending on how you want to do it, if you're going to have people go out and like collect pollinators into little cups and bring them back for you to look at, that's something that we do sometimes with our pollinator safari kind of things. But that is not recommended to do that in the, if you're in an area where rusty patch bumblebee has been found recently. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service maintains a map of those areas.
okay.
So you can look there and see, if you're outside of those areas, you should still be able to handle bumblebees without worrying about it. If you're within one of those areas, it's better if somebody there has a recovery permit, so they're kind of covered for handling bumblebees.
I just put a link
Okay.
in the chat that links to the Bumblebee Atlas website, which is different from Pollinator Ambassadors, but I think that on the Bumblebee Atlas website, there's an interactive map that shows those high and low potential zones, and you can zoom in and see kind of exactly where you fall. And I think the map we have for the Atlas is a lot easier to navigate than what the Fish and Wildlife Service has on their website. So that's usually what I share with people when they're trying to figure out if they're in that Rusty Patch Bumblebee area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Normally, what we do is we go out with the little mesh bug hotels and nets and live capture. But it's good to know that there's that interactive map. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can
And then we
certainly,
release afterwards.
hmm? Oh, no,
I
no,
said, and then we release afterwards.
yeah, nice. One alternative too, if you are in an area that is in that high potential zone, in an area that's likely to have rusty patch bumblebee, there are a couple of options. If you're working with people and you can it's mostly just bumblebees that you need to leave alone, so if you're doing a pollinator safari, if you can feel like you can sufficiently teach people to tell a bumblebee apart from other things, you can have them catch the other things. You can also just have people take photos of everything. So I've definitely done that with BioBlitzes, where we just have people, we use iNaturalist and we just have people take photos and share them there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can definitely, not right now, but we can put a Rusty Patch Bumblebee module on the list for the
Yeah.
future. So we love those ideas for things like that you, where you want more information, we're happy to put those things together.
Here's that slide about with the presentation requirements.
And Candy was asking if working with USDA for developing a pollinator garden, and if those are all on hold. There's a lot of different things going on, and some programs are still going on and some aren't. So I wouldn't assume that they're all on hold. But I wouldn't assume that they're all going to be just going ahead smoothly like we thought they would be either. So that's kind of the best I can guess at an answer there.
If there are no questions, any more questions pertaining to the content, I do kind of have a fun one. I like to ask Elaine and Elsie and anybody else out there. Just let me know when it's appropriate.
I think you can go for it.
Yeah, okay. So last night I watched The Secret World of Sound with Sir David Attenborough. If you don't know him, get to know him. And he talked about the white-tailed bumblebee, which is an European species. And in this, he talked about, and they showed it in slow motion, how the white-tailed bumblebee uses their sound to get nectar from the stamens and the other parts of the flower. And of course, that's the vibrating of the wings and making that sound. Do we have any bee species here that do the same?
Oh yeah, that is buzz pollination. And so all bumblebees do that, that's mostly for pollen. So pollen is like kind of stuck inside the stamens and they, yeah, shake it. There are a good number of other bees besides bumblebees that do that as well. So I know that are some of the sweat bees that do that. And you can hear it. So, so sometimes in your garden, you can sometimes hear this like really sustained pitch, like a different than just the buzzing of flying around. And if you can find where it's coming from, sometimes you can look and see the bees in there doing the buzzing and shaking the pollen, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, honeybees are
Yeah,
the bee that does that, but there are a good number of other bees. All the bumblebees do it, as well as good bunch of other bees too.
yeah, and it was even mentioned, thank you for that, Elaine, very much. And it was even mentioned that it's in an octave C that you would be. It's just not, I just thought it was so interesting. So thank you for letting me ask my question and thanks for answering.
Yeah, just a little aside too. So that is tomatoes are a plant that need to be buzz pollinated. So in greenhouses before, so now people are able to commercially raise bumblebees and they bring them around to greenhouses, but that didn't develop until really kind of the 80s and 90s. Before that time, when they needed to pollinate tomatoes, sometimes they would go around with a tuning fork to that seed, and they would go around and use this tuning fork to get the stamens to release the pollen. Or they also used little electric toothbrushes that would just kind of physically vibrate the tomatoes and pay people to go around and do that. So a lot cheaper to just have bumblebees that'll go around and do it for you.
Any other questions?
And yeah, Stephen had the question about federal funding and being frozen out. So the university shouldn't, yeah, we actually, we currently don't have any funding for this program. We're just doing it.
Yeah, we're just doing it.
So we're not worried about, at this point, we're not worried about having any problems continuing to do this program. So we'll keep doing it.
Yes. I'm just gonna share one final slide here and we can wrap things up just to talk about next steps really quickly. So if you haven't already applied to be a pollinator ambassador, so filling out that application gives us a little bit more information about you, about what your background is, as well as where you're based. After you apply, we will send you the registration link for the training in Canvas, and this is where all of the training modules and associated quizzes are. The next step after that is completing the cumulative evaluation. So this covers all of the content that we talked about today and last week, as well as what's included in the other training videos about the Pollinator Toolkit. Once you've passed your cumulative evaluation, we'll have you give your practice presentation to us, and then you are officially a Pollinator Ambassador. Then for folks that do go ahead and complete all of that, all of those required portions of training, we have a short little volunteer pledge that we share with you. One of the things that's included in that volunteer pledge is our secret code word that kind of affirms you've completed all of the training, and this code word is SCOPA. So SCOPA is a technical term for the pollen collecting hairs that bees might have on their hind legs or under their abdomens. But so keep that in mind for while you're finishing the rest of your training. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I recorded this, so I'm hoping to get it posted to the website by the end of the week. If not by the end of the week, then hopefully early next week. But feel free to shoot either of us an email if any questions come up before that happens or as you get started with your training. Oh, I see another question that just came in from Abby. After we apply, how long before we can find out if we are accepted and can start the class? That's on me. So I generally try to get to applications fairly quickly as they're coming in. But I would say if you don't hear back from me within a week, definitely follow up. I try to get to things quicker than that, but sometimes, depending on the time of year and where other tasks are, things just get lost as they're coming in. But yeah, try generally within a week. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And we hope that lots of you apply and continue to participate in the program and reach out if you need anything. Until then.
Thank you.